Welcome back to the Hoots and Hacks podcast. I'm your host, Brad, digital marketing specialist at Cognisys. My co-host today is our head of information security, Joe.
Hey, I'm Joe, and today we had Gautam Hazari, the CTO at Sekura, discussing how important trust is to Secure ID and their journey to ISO 27001 certification.
Yeah, welcome. Here we're joined by Gautam from Secure ID. How are you? Start off with, how are you doing?
Hi, thanks for inviting me for the podcast. All good. Thank you very much.
Awesome stuff. Have you met Joe before, our head of information security?
No, I have not.
Oh, it's great to meet you, Gautam. It's great, and thank you very much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you. Thanks. Great to meet you.
Do you want to start by just introduce yourself to anybody that doesn't know who you are?
So I'm the co-founder and CTO for Sekura ID. I have been in the identity industry, or rather mobile identity industry, for quite some time. Mostly in the telecom space, have been in the telecom space, working for more than 2 decades now. And so for the last many years, I've been spending a lot of time in mobile identity for various reasons. And then, I'd love to talk about all those.
Brilliant. It sounds like you've had a remarkable career, moving from major roles within Vodafone and GSMA to your current position now as CTO for Sekura. What motivated you to move from these established companies to a smaller startup innovative environment such as Sekura?
Let me start from, I said that I have spent a lot of time in the telecoms and in the identity industry, but I was not trained in the telecom space, right? So I was trained academically in quantum physics, then into computer application, right? So then somehow I ended up in Vodafone, and with a, let's say, fresh pair of eyes, I realized that there are certain assets that's there in the telecom space which are which can actually solve what I call is one of the fundamental problem in the digital space. That's the identity problem. I call it the identity crisis of the internet, because the internet was not designed to identify humans, right? It was invented to identify computers. That's why there are IP addresses. And fortunately or unfortunately, we humans do not have IP addresses, right? So, in the initial days of the internet, it didn't matter, right? So whether it's me who is browsing the AOL or Yahoo, or it's you, or it's the fraudster, no one cared, right? The only thing that was needed was to identify the returning users. That's why cookies were invented, right? So when we started to do some interesting stuff in the internet, like doing commerce, doing social media, buying and selling stuff, doing banking, then it did matter whether it's me who is doing that banking transaction, it's you, is the fraudster, and these days if it's that AI chatbot, right? But that fundamental problem of the internet stayed. So internet didn't have an identity layer. And we started to introduce, I call them stopgap patches. Like we started with passwords. I hate passwords, a lot. I hate it so much that I had to do a TED talk for password, but maybe we'll talk about that later. So anyway, so we started to do passwords, didn't solve the problem. We started to do other things like OTPs, one-time passwords. In some part of the world, it's, you'll have to do even OTPs when you are checking in a hotel, for example. They'll ask you a phone number, and then, or even, you are checking into for a meeting in an office, then they'll ask for OTPs. Anyways, then we thought, okay, that's not enough. Let's do something else. We started to do biometrics, right? And there's a lot of marketing messages on biometrics, but did it really solve the problem? It did it. And it's not me who's saying, because I'm working on that. If you see any of the, let's say popular papers, right? So the Verizon DBIR, the data breach investigation report, that's quite popular in this industry. You see from the last 5 years, you will see that there are certain statistics that never changes. So 80 to 86%, that's the range, right? Every year you will find some number in that range of any data breaches in this digital world is related to what they call credentials, which is identity, right? And the problem is much more fundamental, as I was saying, that the internet doesn't have an identity layer. So the way it works is that it's trustless, right? If I want to do a banking transaction, my bank will say, "Hey, you cannot do that transaction until you prove you're Gautam." And I'll be presented with some form of technological challenges, password, OTPs, biometrics, and then it will do it right. And but what I realized when I was working with Vodafone with my fresh pair of eyes, I saw that the telecom works very differently in relation to identity. If I receive a phone call from Bradley, right, um, it will be funny, almost unacceptable if my mobile operator says, "Hey, you cannot take that phone call until you prove you're Gautam." That's not how it works. So it doesn't challenge me. It just knows I'm Gautam, right? And it allows me to take that call. Same happens when I make that call, right? So, and does it mean it's not secure? It is secure. It's very, very secure. The only thing is it works differently, right? So it knows that it's me, Gautam. So that way, the mobile operators have got something where they can identify me as a human without throwing some sort of technological challenge to me, password, OTP, biometrics, you name it, right? So then I thought that, that something is an asset or mechanism, technology, whatever you say. And they do it through very simplistic mechanism like Ciro, which is a hardware-based cryptographic engine, right? And we carry it in our phones since 1991. And I in SIM stands for identity. And that's why it was made, but it was kept to only the operators, right? So I thought that why don't we use the same mechanism where there is an identity layer to solve the identity crisis of the internet? And that's where the journey started, right? And that was the reason I moved to GSMA, because GSMA, for the audience, if you don't know, because outside the telecom space, you cannot know it. GSMA is the GSM Association. It's the trade organization of mobile operators. So, they work behind the scenes so that all operators can work together. The roaming works, in a seamless way. Interconnection works in a seamless way. And that was the right place to do it, across the globe. And then some of us then started in GSMA, and my reason for moving to GSMA was exactly this: to take this journey, right, to solve this identity crisis of the internet, as I call it. We started an initiative called Mobile Connect, and then I personally wrote the first specification, which is now used by many mobile operators. And then GSMA being a non-profit entity, but very, very influential. I had access to many, many operators. So I managed to get this, um, or rather, I call it liberate the service, which was trapped in the mobile operator space. Outside that, through very simplistic APIs across around 62 mobile operators in 30 countries. Anyways, but then being a non-profit entity, you can only do at certain level. And the program of what it was called Mobile Connect. The program had every program has a start date and an end date, right? So when the program was finishing, some of us who were working in that initiative um, still believed in it, and we thought that we want to continue this journey, and that's how Sekura ID was formed. So that's why the founders and co-founders in Sekura ID we all met in GSMA. We were doing passionately this mobile connecting, which is basically solving the identity crisis of the internet, and that's exactly what we are continuing right now, and we'll keep continuing.
Amazing. Obviously, like with any key challenges, moving to Secure ID from, going into that. I know you've mentioned like, you had this passion, making things safer and for the identity. So was that fueling that, or was there any challenges moving forward into like a more hands-on being CTO, being co-founder of Secure ID?
I mean, there are always challenges in those type of transitions, right? So I have always been worked in large corporates, right? Vodafone, GSMA, and then continuing with the same passion, the same thought, same vision, same journey. doing it in Sekura, where the co-founders need to run the company as well. It's not just just doing what you're told to do, or someone else will solve some of the other problems. So those challenges were there, but those are interesting things because those are the things that I personally learned a lot. Right. At the same time, the fraud space increased to kind of astronomical level, especially after COVID, where majority of the transactions started to happen digitally, right? So, for example, today every 12 seconds in UK, someone gets defrauded, right? The cost of fraud globally is actually 5.1 trillion USD. So, if you place that in, let's say, if you treat fraud as a country, it will be the third largest country in terms of GDP, right? It's less astronomical. So that has given us an opportunity because what I believe is majority of the fraud are not driven through a security issue. The security is for machines, right? We know how to solve security issues. Majority of those are identity problem, and identity is a humane problem, is a humanization problem, right? So in identity, I as a human am involved. For security, the machines are involved. So we have more opportunity to, not get in the trap of phishing or social engineering attacks. So that has given an opportunity, and at the same time has created massive challenges, being a small organization and fraud being such a large, right? It's an organized business now. But no, that's interesting. That actually drives the passion even further.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, the fraud world only gets bigger, so there's always going to be something to tackle, isn't there? Of complex challenges. I want to dive into your TED Talk in a bit as well. I know you've done quite a few, and I remember that when you mentioned about the passwords, like wanting to just get rid of passwords altogether. But could you go back and say what inspired you to start doing TED Talks? Was it the passion to go out there and explain to the world, like like stuff like passwords and how to make things more safe out there in terms of cybersecurity? How did the opportunity come about?
So, I have been talking about these for quite some time. In most of the time, it is in the audiences are in the tech space, if not in the security space, in the tech space, right? Explaining them, um, it's interesting, it's challenging as well, but at the same time, it is important to give the message to the wider world, right? And TikTok is amazing because you cannot use any slides, or you can use some slides. And within that 18 minutes, you need to talk about the problem. You need to talk about the solution, and you need to motivate the listeners to think. You're not providing the complete solution. You have to start giving some um, some elements so that it ignites some passion. So that way, TikTok was always in my uh, kind of list of things that I wanted to do. And then this opportunity came in. Actually, one of the opportunity came in just before the lockdown, and we were starting to do the preps, and then lockdown happened, so it got cancelled. But then after the lockdown, I did that, and the motivation for that was again to getting rid of password. And I had one personal incident as well, which I have spoken about it in my uh, one of the TEDx talk as well. Is my IP camera. It was a while back. At that time, there were not so many variations of IP camera. Security was probably the last thing for those. So my IP camera in my living room was compromised, right? And what I figured out, being from the tech community, the first thing I tried to do is try to access the camera myself through traditional, security means, doing a telnet and so on. And I figured out that there's a um, there's a Linux kernel in there, and then the root password was left as admin, and that was most unacceptable, as we know, right? So now things have improved drastically. So that actually triggered me that the password problem is much, much more, I would say, engrossed in the digital space that we can actually think of, right? Because we are not just talking about someone compromising my banking password, although that's a nightmare, right? That actually
Yeah.
is a financial nightmare. But what if uh, it actually compromises the other systems that we are actually including in our homes, in our smart cities, even the connected pacemakers that you put in inside your bodies, right? Yeah, if they start to use password, that's not acceptable as a digital society. So that was one of the motivation. That motivation is still continuing. That we need to get rid of passwords from the digital space, and password being one of the oldest technology we still use. There's a lot of inertia in there, right? So the passwords were invented even before the web was invented. So it was invented in 1961. We are still using it. Now, I think there is a momentum that has picked up. There are a lot many, not just individuals, organizations are coming up there saying, let's get rid of password. So yeah, it was very, very interesting. There was a lot of dialogue happened after that. So I'm really, really pleased and thankful to all the audiences who have listened and looked into that, because many reached out with ideas and, more importantly, their personal stories.
Yeah, it's interesting how, even though it was a bad event, with the webcam being compromised, like it kind of inspired you to go out there and inspire other people to do something about it, and be a bit more careful. I do agree. It does seem like a lot of companies are taking password security more seriously, whether it's to scrap it or you be smarter about it, use something like Dashlane that can store passwords and provide something that's not just like password 123 and something basic like that. So yeah, it's interesting. It's good to spread awareness about it for sure, because it affects everyone. Everyone uses passwords, right? It's not just companies, it's individuals, personally, business wise.
Yeah, I think the important thing is, when that was one of the frustration, and that's why I started to talk about it much, much more aggressively, is that problem can be solved, right? There are solutions available, and it's been available for very long. And this is where I come in, right? From, as I was talking about my journey through this telecom space into the identity space. It's been there since 1991, right? So 1991 is when this SIM was invented, right? And it actually solved, it has a solution to the password problem. And I'm not saying that's the only solution. That's one of the solutions. There are a lot many other solutions as well, which actually removes the password from the digital space. And what I mean is removing the password, not creating another, kind of a proxy to the password. For example, and again, I have nothing against these password managers, but then it's not really solving the problem, it's hiding the problem, right? So you put all your passwords in a password manager, then you protect the password manager with another password, right? So that becomes a honeypot for these bad guys. And we have seen many incidents in the past, right? So when we say solving the problem, it's getting rid of the password. So that's the only solution, I mean, viable solution, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think because obviously I started my cybersecurity journey about a year ago, so I'm still learning the bits and bobs. But so would you replace, in your like ideal world, would you remove passwords altogether and replace it with maybe um, like Face ID, to get into something, or more, two-factor authentication when you use your mobile to put in a code as opposed to just like typing out a password? Um, or do you have a different idea for it?
So, I think um, it's more fundamental to that. When I say replacing password, it's any form of such mechanisms, right? Because the weakest link is me. It's not quite, I mean, the technology part is probably the easier part, right? It's so the weakest link in this entire mechanism, it's me as a human, right? If I am involved in those, let's say, security dance or identity dance, in that case, whatever anyone does from technological perspective, it will not be completely secure, right? Uh, because, let's take password. Password is a knowledge, right? And if I am involved in providing that knowledge, I'll do funny things because I'm human, right? Like I will reuse my password because I cannot remember all those passwords. And I have been told by someone, don't write it down somewhere, right? Then what I'll do is start to reuse this passwords, and that will create problems. Then what will happen is these passwords will be stored somewhere, right? Because it's knowledge. If knowledge, something that can be stored, that can be stolen, again, the same problem, because I am involved in providing that password. You talked about Face ID and biometrics. And again, let's not really name a particular solution, but those type of solutions, right? Um, there are two problems to it, right? The one problem is, again, it's probably hiding password there. Maybe let's call it Face ID, right? Or the equivalents, right? How do you actually set up Face ID or the equivalents? I'm not just saying Face ID, right? You tie it up because in the digital space, you will always need a digital identifier, right? You tie up Face ID with Apple ID or the equivalents, right? And how do you protect it? Using a password. So you're actually hiding the
Full
password
circle.
story using the full circle, right? So we need to get rid of the password completely, not just hide it. Whether it's a password manager or other. The second part of the story, and again, this is not what I'm saying, and we all know it, right? Because all those biometrics where I am involved, whether it is liveness check with video or audio, with the Gen AI revolution, it has increased the risk drastically, right? Every now and then we hear stories about it. So it can be compromised. So in that case, I think we need to extend the password to get rid of password story to get rid of mechanisms where I, as a human, needs to be involved, right? The machines can be involved, not me as a human, because I'll always be human, right? If I use OTPs or someone sends me a link, I'll always click whatever anyone says, right? Or if I am given an OTP, there will be instances where I'll give it because I'm human, right? So now I wrote an article in Forbes called Amygdala Hijack, right? So now I have some colleagues in this industry as well. They know they work in that fraud space, in the identity space, but you actually can become very emotional and do certain things because you're human, right? You will hand over the OTPs or click a link or do some things that you're not supposed to do. Because again, we are humans, right? We are not evolved as part of our human evolution to understand these risks in the digital space.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And then going on to that then, so like the role and the goal of Sekura as API framework, safer, in creating trust and combating frauds, what is what is the major goal and funding behind that then?
The goal, as I said, is it started with this idea of getting rid of password. And because there's a solution already there, right? It's not about finding a solution. It's to reuse the solution which is already there and liberating it from mobile operators. But at the same time, there are a lot many other assets, data, signals, whatever you call it, information available within the mobile operators, which can actually enhance the confidence on that identity, right? So that's what is the goal of Sekura. And we want to solve this identity problem of the internet, right? That's the bigger kind of purpose. And protect every, we call it OpenT, protect every individual, every transaction, and every thoughts as well, because now even the thoughts are connected to the internet. I call it the Internet of Thoughts, but that we can talk later. And so far, we have been able to touch around 2.5 billion humans. So we have enabled them so that they can be protected through our partners and clients. But the journey is not completed yet, right? So there's still a lot many individuals that needs to be protected globally. And also, we support the United Nations SDG 16.9, which says that every human on Earth should have an identity by the end of 2030, right? There are still around a billion humans around the world who doesn't have any identity, and that's unfair, right? So that's what is something that we are trying to drive through the technology through the platform that we have built, say for Secure API framework, and through the services and the data and the assets that we are utilizing from the mobile operators.
And what ethical considerations guide Secura's development of identity technologies, and how do you ensure user trust and privacy alongside that?
That's the most critical thing in what we are doing, right? Um, and that's kind of principle one, whatever we are doing. One of the important thing here is in this industry, there are three dimensions which are sometimes gets intermingled and sometimes confused with each other. So it's security, identity, and privacy, and trust in between, right? So security and identity are probably the most kind of intermingled one. So this is why we try to separate those out. Security is for machines, identity is for humans, and privacy is the principle that joins these two, right? So one of the most important ethical consideration that we do is humanization, and I personally talk a lot about that, right? Whatever we do, and I call it humanization of technology. Technology will keep on evolving, but it needs to be humanized in all perspectives, right? So, for example, and then that's why security doesn't need to be humanized, because security is for machines. Identity has to be humanized as a technology, because identity is for humans, it's for me, it's my identity. Even if in the IoT world, there still needs to be identifying the machines, but that machine is either owned by me or is impacting me, or it's managing some sort of my life. So there is always a human behind that. So that's the most important principle that we use is humanization of technology, humanization of identity. And trust is the most critical thing in whatever we are doing, right? Because again, this is linked to the humanization, right? And humans cannot interact, whether it's a business interaction, personal interaction, societal interaction, nationwide interaction, without trust. And I know we talk about a lot of zero trust model, etc. in the internet. I personally think we need to really reverse it back. Let's not remove trust from the digital space. Let's build trust. It's probably the same thing, but we're going to say it slightly differently.
What do you think the biggest challenges in that space there are then? Because I think what you're referring to is a major industry change in how people think about identity and access management. So from your opinion, what's the major thing that needs to change within the industry to really roll this out? Is it for mobile operators to support you more, or for further companies to support you in this space? What are the key areas that really need pushing at the moment?
That's a very important question that we need to ask first, right? Because otherwise the path will be very different, right? So I think the most important thing right now is to accept the problem, because otherwise we will keep on trying answering it and creating solutions, but for a different problem, right? And I think the most important problem right now is to identify these as identity problems, not really security problem. Even I think AI is an identity problem, right? If the AI chatbot or a deepfake video can identify itself as generated by AI, then we solve the problem, right? Then I will still be happy to see the deepfake video of my family, pretending to be my family member, but then I'll use it as entertainment, not as some serious thing, right? So that's an identity problem. So the first thing is to identify and accept that that's a problem. That's the problem. It's an identity problem that we have been dealing with. The second thing that we need to that's kind of critical here is that the internet doesn't have that identity layer. I think that that acceptance is happening slowly, but it's not, because if we accept those, then we will not try to put patched up solution, right? That's what we have been doing for the last many years, at least 3 decades, right? We are creating these patched up problems, from passwords to OTPs to even some form of biometrics, and then tomorrow probably we'll add some other solutions. So now we're talking about cryptographic authentication as well, um, in the industry, right? So if we accept that the internet doesn't have an identity layer as a problem, then we will find a solution. So the solution will be, we cannot rebuild the internet from ground zero right now. So let's add that in identity layer.
Amazing. Oh, that sounds yeah, that makes complete sense. And I think on the topic of trust as well, obviously you worked with us at Cognisys to pursue your ISO 27001 certificate, which is fantastic. So what motivated Sekura to pursue the certification, and how did our Digital Trust Accelerator play a role in this process?
As you rightly mentioned, trust, right? So that's the biggest motivator here. So we are working to provide the, let's say, mechanism or creating that identity layer for the internet, right? And as I said, one of the key principles that we use from ethical perspective and as a principle which drives everything is humanization, right? And where trust is critical. So being a company who is being an organization and building technologies which is trying to solve these fraud issues, these identity issues, right? We need to create an environment where whoever we are working with from both sides, right? We work on one side, on the southbound side, we work with mobile operators. On the northbound side, we work with our partners, with our clients, which are very large banks, sometimes wallet providers, e-commerce providers, and on, so that they can trust that whatever we are doing, all our processes are as per they should be, right? They're all documented, uh, and they're all reviewed constantly. And then we have some sort of trust mark as well, where we don't need to explain it again and again, right? That yes, we are doing it in the right way. So that's the reason, or that's the kind of motivation we wanted to get um, ISO 27001 certified. And also, there is a practical thing as well. We are a small organization, right? And for small organizations, agility is the agility is the critical uh, things, right? So for every, let's say, large organizations that we are working with, we need to go through the same set of, let's say, infosec questionnaires, right? And process questionnaires. So then we always used to get asked that, are you ISO 27001 certified or not? That was another reason as well, because from the time we got certified with amazing help from Cognisys and also tools like Fanta, um, then the first thing that we say is we are ISO 27001 certified, right? So then they know that what we have, right? And also then we get them access to Vanta, right? And all the, let's say, compliance documents that we have created. So that has added on to our agility, that is saving us time, cost, resource, and we can actually move faster in our broader goal to make the internet safe.
Amazing. That sounds brilliant. And maybe before you engaged with us and Vanta, is this something that you started to try and implement yourself? Did you come across any challenges before you wanted to work with someone like Cognisys, partnered with Vanta?
Yeah, so we were looking into options, right? One thing was we are a small organization, right? We don't have a lot of, let's say, time to, let's say, document many of the things, right? We knew that we have to document, but not, let's say, all the processes. How do we actually ensure that they're done in the right way and so on? So through all the, let's say, onboarding process with our stakeholders, both from mobile operators and from clients' perspective, um, of course, we had all the, let's say, right things that we were doing, but then you need to create some, standard documentations as well there, right? And we were struggling to do that ourselves, right? Because that would have really taken out some part of our agility. Then we'll have to stop for some time, do all those things, right? So understand the, let's say, auditing process, and then jump into doing what we do best, right? So at that moment of time, we thought that we were sure that there are organizations who are helping organizations like us to do exactly what we want to do, right? Do it in a shortest possible time, not cutting any corners, but doing in the most agile way, right? And also help us with some tooling and also the compliance documents, right? So this is where we reached out. And yeah, I'm really, really glad that the team reached out and it worked pretty well. So we achieved the ISO 27001 in 6 weeks, which is I'm very, very pleased for that. And thanks to Cognisys for helping our team for that.
No, that's great to hear. And obviously, 6 weeks is a really short time frame when you're looking at achieving, something like ISO 27001. So, given the duration of the program and how we interacted, what were some of the most challenging aspects of achieving ISO 27001 throughout our DTA program?
Yeah, I think one of the challenge was for us internally was to get everyone involved, right? Because we needed everyone to participate in there because everyone's, for example, their laptops, the machines that they're using, etc., needed to be participate. We needed to organize some form of training for them as well, uh, and also all the digital assets that we have needed to be, kind of an inventory needed to be created. Um, so that kind of prep work for us was a bit challenging because we didn't know where to start, right? Because there was a lot many things there, but where do you start? How do you start? So this is where I think some of the project management that was done or helped by the Cognisys team and the DTA process really helped, right? So that gave us our team some guidance. Okay, do it this way. One of the other very interesting thing where I participated personally as well was a mock drill, right, of a security incident. I loved it because I have done it in the past in Vodafone. So that actually reassured us. I would not say that was challenging, but I was actually thinking if certain things like that happen, how do you actually do it? And was it part of the ISO? And we were told that that needs to be documented as part of the ISO certification process as well. So that's something I would not say challenging, but I really appreciate doing that because that helped us um, kind of reaffirming the the process that we already have, and are we really ready to
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes when you maybe go through a process step by step, as if you're actually responding to an incident, you see things in a slightly different way, and you might think we could change this process here, or bring in further people here. So, yeah, it's great that you thought that was really helpful when you do actually go through that step by step. But no, that's fantastic. And you talked about there, a big challenge was getting people involved. Do you think that now you've gone through the process of getting your ISO 27001 certificate, do you feel like there's been a culture change within Sekura and that people are more engaged and actively involved with your ISMS and security in general?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a and for the next time it will be much much smoother. I know, right? And then I have to say even the tool Vanta that helped us a lot, right? Because it automated many of the controls and who needs to do what, right? Um, so that way, yes. So now there is much, much more awareness beyond just the technical team as well. So now we have the processes across the board, right? And we are a distributed team in multiple countries as well, right? So now it feels like, the entire, let's say, um, organization, especially for this process perspective, is much, much more integrated together. And yes, I think that can only come through that mind shift and cultural change.
Amazing. No, that's great to hear. And you mentioned it there, Vanta's really supported you on that compliance effort as well. How is that Vanta automated compliance platform, how has that supported you achieve ISO and also maintain that following successful certification as well?
Absolutely. So as I was saying earlier, right? So we had this 6 week goal. At the same time, to achieve that, of course, the Cognisys and the DTA process definitely helped, right? It gave us the proper direction to what to do, when, how to do it, and handholded the team who are working. At the same time, the Vanta as a tool and those automated compliance checks that provided us with the similar guidance from the, let's say, systems perspective, right? So, for example, where we needed certain things to be done in how, and also, as I said earlier as well, to provide us with templates of the process documents that really help, right? Because in that case, we were doing most of the things in the right way anyway, but they were not documented, right? And in some of the cases, for example, for some of the systems, there were certain things that we need to look into slightly differently. So these automated compliance checks actually highlighted that, right? In the shortest possible time, because if we had to do it, let's say, manually, I don't know how long it would have taken, right? So that way, definitely Vanta helped us a lot, and not just for doing the certification, it's helping even now, right? So on a daily basis, I get a report on where it is right now, right? And then we pick it up. Now, because of that cultural shift, everyone picks up themselves, right? They know what exactly it means, what do they need to do it. If they need any help, they reach out to the individuals who can actually help doing that. So yeah, so it's been a very, very kind of positive journey, I would say.
Oh, brilliant. That's great to hear. And obviously now you've got your certification in place. Are Secure ID and yourself, are you planning to enrich that further in terms of maintain and enhance the ISMS? Is that something that's on your roadmap?
Yeah, absolutely. Because as I said, trust is critical, right? And this actually enhances that trust because whoever we work with, that's the first thing they want to check, right? We are working with very, very sensitive data, right? We are working with very, very kind of, let's say, regulatory sensitive organizations as well. Operators anywhere in the world, right? They're always, there is a regulatory angle there. And also, most of our clients who are using the service, they're also from, for example, from the financial industry, large banks, they're also extremely regulated. So in that case, of course, we will be, taking this journey further. Firstly, continuing it, and then adding some enhancement onto it is in the roadmap. And again, we just need to be pragmatic and practical as well. Whatever is needed, we don't want to overdo it. At the same time, we don't want to cut short any corners, right? So it's in the roadmap, and we will keep working on that journey.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think you're absolutely right in terms of, when you're looking to improve your ISMS, you got to keep it in context to your company objectives and goals in terms of the maturity of certain controls. They'll develop as your company grows and develops as well. So it's absolutely right to look at, the maturity of your company and map that to the kind of maturity of your ISMS as well. So yeah, that's a really good point. And now you've got this in place. You've gone through the whole process. What advice would you provide other startups like yourself you kind of established this now, aiming for 27,001 certification?
Yeah, so I would advise any of the startups of, let's say, similar size or even, larger size to, firstly, I don't think I need to actually explain the benefit of ISO 27001 certification, right? Because it helps a lot, especially for startups. If you're in the technology space, doesn't have to be in the identity or security space. If you're in the technology space, that helps a lot from practical perspectives, because it will help, propagating the trust that your clients will have in the processes, in the systems that you have. But at the same time, I would advise to, look into processes like the DTA and tools like Panta, because that then helps in the long run, right? So that actually um, doesn't hinder in the speed that you are working with. It actually adds on to the agility. And at the same time, it lets you continue the journey. I mean, not just, okay, got certified, then what, right? So it helps you continue with the journey. So I would advise, um, any startup who are seriously looking into enhancing their trust and not trying to do the same thing again and again, like, answering all those infosec queries. all the time, because you have to do it anyway. But at the same time, if you want to optimize that, I think this is the way to do it.
Yeah, one thing I've liked about speaking with yourself is just I feel like it all comes back to trust in the end, doesn't it? And I feel like that might be the defining factor of cybersecurity. Your customers trust you to make sure like their data is protected, just as like other companies in like the financial industry would. And then you guys put your trust in Cognizant and Banner to make sure we can go through your policies, make sure everything's in check. So I like that. It's sort of like a nice overview of just in general cybersecurity. It all comes back to trust, right?
Yeah, thanks. That's something that we need to. It's almost like we need to rebuild, and with the Gen AI revolution, I think that trust is getting a bit eroded. So it's even more important and contextual in the current time, where we do whatever is needed. We may need to relook into, how do we enhance? I'm sure the ISO process will need to be evolved in the context of the Gen AI revolution, right? Because I'm sure there are additional processes, additional controls that need to be added so that the new threats, which needs new processes, new mechanisms, new controls to be added there. And the objective is exactly the same. How do we actually keep and enhance the trust on the business so that it becomes much easier for the parties to do business together?
Yeah, would that be ISO 2001, Joe, in that respect?
Yeah.
Because that's the AI management, isn't it?
Yeah, so there's new frameworks coming in, to reflect the change in kind of, that certification space. So, I'm sure that's something that you'd be looking on your long-term roadmap as well. But yeah, completely agree. As the threat landscape changes, you always want to make sure that you're maintaining, the same level of security across in terms of whatever's changing on the horizon. So that's really good to hear that you're looking at integrating, how you can maintain your integrity and data security in the changing kind of attack surface and threat landscape, really.
Amazing. Yeah, well, that comes to the end of the podcast. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. And it's been really interesting to hear about your perspectives on passwords, secure IDs, goals for the future. I guess the last thing I want to ask is anything that Secure ID would like to plug or anything that's going on that you would like to talk about?
Thanks for having me in the podcast, Bradley and Joe.
Pleasure.
So lots of exciting stuff coming in, especially with the agentic AI trying to rule the digital space. And as Joe, you said, the threat landscape is changing. So of course we need to adapt, right? So fighting fraud is a cat and mouse game, right? It never stops. Who is taking more steps? How fast? That's how it works, right? So we are working on some exciting stuff. We are utilizing a lot of machine learning right now as well. So the teams they have created some amazing tools and services where we are fighting AI-induced fraud with AI. So 2025, I'm sure will be challenging from fraud perspective, because we can already see a lot of frauds where you don't even need to be, and it has gone beyond internet. So you don't even need to be connected to the internet to do those frauds. Many of the frauds, or especially these threats, are coming from side channel attacks where you don't need to be connected. And to solve those problems as well, you need to use different tools and mechanisms. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, great stuff. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for coming on. It's great to hear your goals and your challenges, for next year. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much.
All
Thanks.
the best. Take care.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Cheers.